I actually really enjoyed the analogy.
You did.
Yes, we're seeing a little bit of
Please explain it to me because
you
I
know,
have a lot of issue.
writing like his master Plato, right? A bit of an analogy here. I think it is describing what we were talking about in more detail, I suppose. He's saying that you've got one man routing at first, right? That's the first thing that you're perceiving. That's the particular, if we want to use the proper terminology, right? You've got what you would say is like a sensible particular. You're like a table, for example. You're seeing one table, you're recognizing it, you're observing it, right? That's your sense perception. And he's saying that the soul has this capacity, right? That's how he ends that sentence. He has this is something that the soul is capable of, like we're out in battle. Um, so that's the capacity for reason that we talked about. So as you're seeing more and more tables, that's how you start to generalize or abstract out to the universal.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what he would describe like a rout in battle, that you have this like formation falling apart. So it's like one by one, the whole thing comes together. Um, that
Help
is what I'm
help
assuming
me
he's meaning.
understand that analogy a little bit. Like not how it relates to the soul, but literally understand what he's talking about in the analogy. So you have a battle. He's saying
Mm-hmm.
that you, you know, kill one person, and then as you start to kill more, then the route takes shape and forms. Is that
So I think so.
what he's saying?
So as in a battle, when a rout occurs, if one man makes a stand, another does, and then another, until a position of strength is reached. Right. So I think it's like so you have one man takes a stand, and another joins him, and another joins him, and then another joins him, and then you have a strengthened, confident
I see.
position,
Mm-hmm.
right? Kind of like so that like with induction, right? So you see this one is white, this one is white, this one is white, this one is white. The more white swans you see, the more confident you can be in your generalized observed principle that all swans are white.
Or
If I've
or in the syllogism, although it's a little bit trickier, but
sure,
all men are mortal, right? Where would you get that premise from? Well, one man's mortal, another man's mortal, third one's mortal. You get the formation. That's
I
the
see.
all men are mortal. That's the original formation is restored in the battle, right? And that's what he would say.
right.
So you get this principle, um, and then he adds this in, right? The soul is capable of this, right?
I
So
see.
that's interesting because we have the soul's our rational capacity. We're capable of reforming the battle line, if you want to put it that way.
I
Um,
okay.
Mm.
Now I understand. See, I'm not a military guy, so I had trouble with that, but now I understand it much more. Um, so he's so it's you get the premises. He's saying you get the premises of a deductive argument through induction.
That's what it sounds like. That's what that sounds like.
Okay.
yeah.
But that's but we're not in that much of a different position today. We are well think about because if we go back to our philosophy of science class, which we were talking about earlier when we were talking about Karl Popper's solution to the problem of induction,
False. It has to be falsified.
falsification, right? Because then like so you see one instance of a black swan, you can deduce from one instance of a black swan
Mm-hmm.
that not all swans are white. You don't need to observe many instances of it, right? But
How does that relate to?
it relates to it because well, your deductive argument, but the premises for your deductive argument are still arrived at through induction. So like it sort of helps with the problem of induction a little bit, but not totally because you're still having to rely on experience in a way to arrive at the premises of your inductive argument, which is what you said that Aristotle is saying. Aristotle is saying you arrive at your premises for your syllogism through the
Explain
induction.
one more time how Popper's falsification theory relates to that.
So because what we're trying to do in scientific investigation is to land on
Right.
something solid, right?
Right.
And so the problem of induction was, well, how do you justify the use of inductive reasoning? Well, through inductive reasoning, you say because it worked, it provided us with this answer at this time in history,
Right.
right? So it's then circular,
Problem induction.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so that's not solid. And so Karl Popper's, and I'm not an expert on this, so correct me if I get this wrong. As I understood it, his suggestion was, well, you use deductive reasoning, right, by relying on falsification rather than verification. So you take a hypothesis and you try and disprove it rather than look to the world to verify it, right? Because then when you come across a falsifying instance, you can then deduce from that singular instance the
Right.
falsity of your hypothesis.
Yes.
Right. But just still looking to the world for that for the instances of your premises that build up your deductive argument. So like it's a
I see.
it's a partial solution to the
Okay.
problem of induction, but not a total. And I again I stress not an expert on that point. It's just from my very loose understanding of what we went. But that's what you're asking if Aristotle is saying. And so I was trying to give that as an example.
Understood. I get it now.
Well, even the falsifiable instance, like the black swan, that's also from sense perception.
Yes, yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I think your description of Popper is correct. He tries to solve. Well, the problem of induction is really a problem for science, at least in the way he tackles it, and he tries to say that science can work deductively. But yeah, you're right. Aristotle is essentially saying if we drill down to the first principles, everything would have to come from sense perception.
Right.
It makes no sense for it not to come from sense perception, and I think modern day scientists would probably agree with Aristotle.
But that's very interesting, right? Because he like, I know Descartes was way after him, but Descartes just took his position and said, okay, I'm kind of with you, but except these first principles are not through, sense perception. We get them through, I don't know, meditation, reflection.
I don't know that, because when I was reading that, right,
Which one?
the meditation,
Yeah.
right, when he lands on, the famous "I think therefore I am,"
Yeah.
right, like it's certainty of experience, and like certainty of nothing else other than the fact of experience itself, right? I cannot be deceived that I'm having this experience. So I may be deceived about the content of my experience, right? So the men across the road might be automatons. I might not have hands.
Right.
This might be a dream, but the fact of experience is certain to me, and therefore I know I am, right? That's still experience, right? That's like, I know it's like meditative, rational, but like it's still inductive in a very strange way, because
I guess, but it's not relying on your senses.
I would say I understand what you're saying about the first principle for Descartes, but he does the way he justifies the cogito, right? He justifies it by reason,
right.
Because for him it would be a contradiction to be able to be deceived if you don't exist and nothing is being deceived, right? I suppose yes, you could interpret him, if you want to give him like an Aristotelian take. You could say that he's still relying on some sort of experience, right? Because even the translation is not actually the most accurate translation, as far as I'm aware, is not "I think therefore I am," right? It's "I am, I exist." That's how he wanted to phrase it, right? It's there is no thinking, right? It's not a step in an argument. He doesn't like that, because that's room for doubt. That's room for the demon to come in and deceive you, right? Because you don't know, we use logic, obviously, but here we're talking about a really powerful entity, and we don't even know where our logic comes from. So he says that's not certain, which is quite interesting, right? I mean, he's a rationalist saying the logical stuff is not certain. He's saying, but I have this experience that I am at the moment here. I exist, and that's why it's in the first person as well, because I cannot justify yours existence, right? The demon could fool me about you.
Right.
It can fool me about myself, because if I'm not here, then it's not fooling anything.